Hello and good morning, dear all children. Today I am here with the second part of the chapter, The Happy Prince, written by Oscar Wilde. In the previous part, we have already studied about the two kind acts of the Happy Prince and the Little Swallow. So now let's know more about their kindness. So after completing the second task of helping the playwright, the little swallow came to the prince to say him goodbye because he was going to Egypt. But this time the prince again requested to stay with him for one night longer, and the purpose was to help the match girl now. But the little bird said that it is winter, answered the swallow, and the snow will soon be here. In Egypt, the sun is warm on the green palm trees, and the crocodiles lie in the mud and look lazily about them. So the bird said that the tough winter season was going to be started, and after some time the snowfall would also start. While in comparison to this country, the weather in Egypt was warm, and even the crocodiles lay on the mud lazily there. So he told him to let him go to Egypt. But the prince said, in the square below, said the happy prince, there stands a little match girl. She has let her matches fall in the gutter, and they all are spoiled. Her father will beat her if she does not bring home some money, and she is crying. She has no shoes or stockings. Stockings means socks, and gutter means sewage. And her little head is bare. Pluck out my other eye and give it to her, and her father will not beat her. So the happy prince started telling the story of the miserable condition of the little girl who was matchbox seller. He said there was a little match girl who was going to sell the matchboxes in the area, but unfortunately all her matchsticks fell in the sewage, and now they all were wet and spoiled. So she was very sad because if she would go home without any money, her father would get angry with her and beat her badly. So she was crying, thinking about all this. The happy prince also added that the girl was so poor that she had no money to buy shoes or some woolen socks for her, and her head was also not covered with anything. So she was barefooted even in this hard winter season. So the prince requested the swallow to pluck out another sapphire from his eyes and give it to the little girl, so that she will not be get punished by her father. I will stay with you one night longer, said the swallow, but I cannot pluck out your eye. You would be quite blind then. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, do as I command you. Now the swallow was agreed to stay for one night longer with the prince because he also wanted to help the prince in his task, but he was hesitating to pluck out the sapphire from the eyes of the happy prince because in this condition he would be quite blind then. So he denied to do so. But the happy prince requested the bird again to do the task. So he plucked out the prince's other eye and darted down with it. Darted down means moved. He swooped past the match girl and slipped the jewel into the palm of her hand. Swooped means came across. So the swallow did whatever said by the happy prince and moved on towards the little girl. When he came across by the match girl, he dropped the blue gem in her hands. What a lovely bit of glass, cried the little girl, and she ran home laughing. Now the little girl was very happy after getting this precious stone on her hands, and she ran happily towards her home. Now then the swallow came back to the prince. You are blind now, he said, so I will stay with you always. No, little swallow, said the poor prince, you must go away to Egypt. No, I'll stay with you always, said the swallow, and he slept at the prince's feet. Now, after doing this task, the swallow came back to the happy prince and promised him that he will not leave him now because he was blind, and he will not leave his company in that condition when he wanted his help, and he will become his eyes by describing the things happening around him. So the prince told the bird to go to Egypt because it was necessary for him to meet his friends too, but the bird was not ready to leave him alone now. He said that he would stay with him only, and then he slept at the prince's feet. All the next day he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him stories of what he had seen in strange lands. Dear little swallow, said the prince, you tell me of marvelous things. Marvelous means amazing and wonderful, but more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and women. There is no mystery means secret, so great as misery. Fly over my city, little swallow, and tell me what you see there. Now, the swallow used to stay along with Happy Prince only all the time and used to tell him the stories of the different places that he had visited. He flew over the whole city and told the Happy Prince about the wonderful things. So one day the Happy Prince told the swallow that he told him the wonderful things about the city, but nothing was more wonderful than the sufferings of the people, and no secret, no mystery was bigger than the sadness of the people, and the prince wanted to know that who was sad actually in his kingdom. So he asked the swallow to be his eyes and go to the city and let him know about the sufferings of the people. So the swallow flew over the great city and saw the rich making merry in their beautiful houses while the beggars were sitting at the gates. He flew into dark lanes and saw the white faces of starving children looking out listlessly at the black streets. Under the archway of a bridge, two little boys were lying in each other's arms to try and keep themselves warm. Archway means passage. How hungry we are, they said. You must not lie here, shouted the watchman, and they wandered out into the rain. Wandered means walked or roamed. Now, as the prince requested, the swallow flew and took a round of the city and saw the rich people were living happily in their beautiful houses and they were partying, while the poor people were suffering, they were begging and sitting outside the gates. Then he also visited to the dark streets where there was darkness all around and poor people also lived there. He also noticed that the children were hungry and their faces were bloodless. Further, he saw two little boys under the passage of the bridge and they were lying closer to make themselves warm. They were talking and wondering about that how hungry they were. Suddenly, the watchman came and rebuked them to go out from there, and the poor children had to roam in the rain because they were homeless. Then he flew back and told the prince what he had seen. After watching all this, the bird came and told everything to the prince. I am covered with fine gold, said the prince. You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to the poor. The living always think that gold can make them happy. Now the happy prince told the swallow that his whole body was coated with fine gold, so the bird could take tiny pieces of the gold from his body and give it to the poor people in need. As all the human beings think that the money was required by them, and when they would get gold, they would feel happy. Now, layer after layer, the swallow gave the gold to the poor, and the happy prince was looking quite dull and grey. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold he brought to the poor, and children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played in the street. We have bread now, they cried. So, layer after layer, the swallow was giving the gold to the poor persons who were in need, and the statue was not looking beautiful now. The children's faces were red now because they were getting proper food to eat. They laughed together and played in the streets with happiness. They were happy because their basic needs were fulfilled now. Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost. The streets looked as if they were made of silver. Everybody went about in furs, and the little boys wore scarlet caps and skated on the ice. Scarlet means red colored. Now the time came when it started snowing, and a lot of snow fell in that area. Everything was frozen. The streets were covered with white snow and looking like coated with silver. Everyone was wearing clothes made of fur to keep themselves warm. Little children were wearing red colored caps and were enjoying skating in the snow covered streets. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince. He loved him too well. He picked up crumbs outside the baker's door when the baker was not looking, and tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. Now the swallow was feeling very cold, as there was much cold now, but he kept on sitting near by the statue of the happy prince. He did not want to leave the prince because he loved him so much. The bird wanted to stay for more days with the prince, so to survive himself, he used to go to the bakery and eat the breadcrumbs from there when the baker was not looking, and tried to keep himself warm by flapping its wings. But at last he knew that he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. "Goodbye, dear prince," he murmured. "Will you let me kiss your hand?" Now, but one day he realized that he could live no longer, as it grew colder than ever. He collected much strength to fly up to the shoulder of the prince once more. Then he said him goodbye, and also shared his last wish to kiss on his hands to show his love for him for the last time. "But I am glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow," said the prince. "You have stayed too long here, but you must kiss me on the lips, for I love you." The happy prince thought that the bird was finally ready to go to Egypt, so he was glad to know this, and he told him to kiss on his lips because he loved him too, and he spent a good time with the happy prince. "It is not to Egypt that I am going," said the swallow. "I am going to the house of death. Death is the brother of sleep, is he not?" And he kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell down dead at his feet. Now, then the bird informed him that he was not going to Egypt as he was thinking, but going to the house of death. He was going to die, and he kissed on his lips and fell dead on his feet. And at that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is that the leaden heart had snapped right in two. Snapped means broken. It certainly was a dreadfully hard frost. So all of a sudden, when the bird died in his feet, an unusual sound came out from the statue. This was the sound of breaking of the statue's heart, which was made of lead. The heart broke because of the death of his beloved bird, but it was assumed that the leaden heart broke because of the cold weather. Early the next morning, the mayor was walking in the square, Willow in the company with the town councillors. Councillors means member of the council. Mayor means the head of the city. As they passed the column, he looked up at the statue. "Dear me, how shabby the happy prince looks," he said. Shabby means dirty. "How shabby indeed," cried the town councillors, who always agreed with the mayor, and they went up to look at it. So now the next morning, the mayor of the city, along with his councillors, was taking a round of that area where the statue of Happy Prince was built. When he came across this statue, he noticed that it was untidy. The councillors also agreed with whatever the mayor used to say, so they also considered the statue was untidy. 1. "The ruby has fallen out of his sword. His eyes are gone, and he is golden no longer," said the mayor. "In fact, he is little better than a beggar." "Little better than a beggar," said the town's councillors. Now the mayor noticed that the ruby stone, which was fixed in the sword's handle, was missing. Not only the ruby, but the sapphires were also missing from the eyes, and the gold covering was also not there. So the statue was looking very poor, like a beggar. The town councillors were also agreed with the mayor. "And here is actually a dead bird at its feet," continued the mayor. "We must really issue a proclamation that birds are not allowed to die here." And the town clerk made a note of the suggestion. So proclamation means declaration or order, you can say. So the mayor also noticed that a dead bird was lying there in the feet of the prince, and he ordered to pass on the rule that the birds are not allowed to die in the feet of the statue. The town clerk noted the suggestion for record. So they pulled down the statue of the Happy Prince. "As he is no longer beautiful, he is no longer useful," said the art professor of the university. So the art professor of the university said that now the statue of the Happy Prince did not look beautiful and was not useful anymore. and so they should destroy it. Then they melted the statue in the furnace. What a strange thing, said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry. Overseer means manager or supervisor, you can say. Foundry means factory. This broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace. We must throw it away. So they threw it on the dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. So they melted the statue as it was ordered by the mayor, which was looking dirty in the big furnace. But the supervisor of the foundry realized that the leaden heart would not melt in the fire. So he ordered the workers to throw it away. And coincidentally, they threw the heart at the heap of dust where the dead body of the small bird was also lying. Bring me two most precious things in the city, said God to one of his angels, and the angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. You have rightly chosen, said God, for in my garden of paradise this little bird shall sing for evermore, and in my city of gold the happy prince shall praise me. So now in the heaven, God asked his angel to bring only two most precious things of the city. The angel brought broken pieces of the prince's heart and the dead body of the bird. They were precious according to him because they both sacrificed their life for the sake of happiness of the poor people. The God was very happy over the selection of his angel as he rightly chosen the precious things. So he decided that the bird would always sing in the garden of his heaven and the happy prince would stay in the city of gold and admire him always. So their goodness of heart was rewarded by the God. So children, this is all about the story which tell us about the value of love and sacrifice in life. I hope it is clear to all of you. We'll meet in the next class soon. Till then, have a good time with your family and never stop learning. Have a good revision of this chapter too. Thank you all. Have a nice day.